In the fall of 1980, I was finishing up a 3-year project documenting the vernacular architecture of all of Minnesota's county fairgrounds. From there, I had gotten interested in state fairs and former World's Fair sites. I decided I had to go to Paris, Brussels, and New York and photograph these sites that so reflected their locations, cultures, and times. Around the same time, my father knew 3 sisters who were distant cousins. The 3 had gone on a tour of Norway and briefly made contact from where all the Husoms came from. They gave my father a Xerox of a brochure for the Husom Hotel. That did it. I would start to save up money and make plans to go to Europe and find the roots of fairs and my personal roots in the summer of 1982. In 1981, I was teaching a 5-week non-credit workshop on Saturday afternoons in color printing. Color was very touchy compared to black and white, and one week something went wrong. I told the class we should just head for the bar down the street and I'd buy the first round. We could come back on Sunday and continue with new chemicals at that time. It was, as they say, a different era. In a darkroom class, there was a lot of time standing around and lots of opportunity to talk. Therefore, I knew that Anne Marie Rose had returned to Minnesota after living in Sweden for a spell. I purposely sat across from her at the bar and wanted to talk and find out more about visiting Scandinavia. The next day, I found her alone in a dark room looking at a poster for a show I was in. As I always did, I had invited the class to the opening. She didn't tell me for quite some time, but she later confessed that she was there. I told her I enjoyed our conversation, and she said, "Well, would you like to come and see my slides of Sweden?" It really was a completely honest and not a come-on, and sure, of course I wanted to see him. We went on a date to my favorite Mexican restaurant. It was so authentic it was busted for marijuana smuggling. We had dated a few months, and a young woman she had met in Japan while visiting American friends there was on a post-college tour of the U.S. Since Anne Marie had recently returned to Minnesota, she asked for my help in entertaining Misako. Of course I knew the hot spots. I'm sure I took him to the Caboose Bar on the West Bank. When Misako left, she invited both of us to come and see her in Japan and offered her grandmother's house as a place to stay. I thought it was a nice gesture, but remember, I had to go find my roots in Norway and see the Eiffel Tower. After hashing it back and forth for a few months, me wanting to go to Europe and Anne Marie wanting to go to Japan, she came up with the perfect solution. We would do both. Day 1, June 5th, 1982. We leave MSP Airport and arrive in Los Angeles. It's my 34th birthday. This is the first leg of a 3.5-month journey that will take David Husom and Anne Marie Rose through 24 cities on 3 continents. It'll quite literally be a trip around the world. Having just arrived in Los Angeles, it's important to experience LA firsthand. A taco stand on Santa Monica Boulevard. Everywhere in LA there are classic cars, but Anne Marie knows the real LA and picks out the perfect rental car, a baby blue 1965 Ford Mustang. For me, LA is new, but for Anne Marie it's a return to a home of 11 years. We celebrate my birthday with a bottle of Chateau Margaux 1973, although being a year older seems rather insignificant when I look at the 100 days we have ahead of us. We walk along the beach feeling exhilarated yet peaceful, watch the sun go down. It is about seeing the sights. June 10th, day 5, LA to Hong Kong. There's about as much legroom as you'd expect in the backseat of a European sports car. The difference is the sports car would probably travel faster, not need refueling so often, and would have more working toilets. At long last, it's time to land at tiny Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong. We skim over the roofs of tenements as the plane continues to head directly into an apartment and office complex in the middle of the city. At seemingly the last second, the plane takes a sharp right turn, drops down onto the runway. A quick slam on the brakes, and we are at the far end of the runway, out in the bay, surrounded by water on 3 sides. Hong Kong lives its life on the street, whether that street be concrete or water, whether your transportation be a rickshaw or Rolls-Royce, a junk or an 80-foot yacht. The humidity is unbelievable. The buildings here in Hong Kong make up for it by air conditioning down to a pleasant 65 degrees. By the end of the first day, our lungs ache from the temperature changes, but that doesn't keep us from going out on a major shopping binge. Everything is fast in Hong Kong. Even the elevators and escalators seem to move at twice what we would consider a normal pace. It's a city where 50-story high-rise buildings are built with bamboo scaffolding. At night, Hong Kong comes alive with an energy. We are clearly on our own now. The sound of drums call everyone to a grand opening of a new shoe store. Dancers dress up in dragon costumes are driving the spirits out of the store. Is it religious or just a grand opening show? Probably a bit of both. It's a city that offers a lot in just a few short days. Day 8, June 13th. Tokyo. We land at Narita Airport and breeze through customs. As soon as we get on the bus to head to Tokyo, I know we are someplace new and different. We are met at the bus depot by Misako. She has offered to put us up in her apartment in Tokyo and her grandmother's house in her hometown of Shimoda. On a rare, clear day from her apartment balcony, we see the looming presence of Mount Fuji off in the west. Even these traditional Japanese drummers do not seem out of place in the modern high-rise district of Shinjuku. Misako informs us the bad news that our Russian visas have been lost in bureaucratic paperwork, and we must attempt to reapply at the Russian embassy on Monday. In addition, we must now negotiate the Tokyo subway system to get to the embassy. But when Monday comes, we do make it to the Russian embassy on our own. We finally get in and leave with the assurance that everything will be worked out in the next 2 weeks. Misako has quickly become a dear friend, and through her, we are learning the intricacies of Japanese culture. In the process, we are learning to look more closely at ourselves and our own culture. In the end, that is one of the real reasons why we are on this trip. I'm still loving the pace, up at the crack of dawn every day, raring to go. Anne-Marie, however, has been hit with a major case of jet lag and wants to slow down. But a quiet day in the park soothes some of our attention, but it is apparent that a trip of this nature will not be a simple excursion to easy tourist destinations. We are not on a group tour, it's just us. You do not have to speak Japanese to order food. All you need to do is point at the plastic models of the dish you want. On Sundays, Tokyo's youth gather at Yoyogi Park, site of the 1964 Summer Olympics. While the pre-teens listen to Japanese pop music, the older members of the crowd dance to American 1950s rock and roll. From hundreds of boom boxes comes the sound of early Elvis and Bill Haley. The clothing matches the era of the music, but it often comes across for us as being rather camp. However, much of the dancing is obviously very well choreographed and very well rehearsed. Having spent so much time in big, vibrant cities, we really do feel a need to unwind, take a couple of days off from the intensity by visiting Misako's hometown in Shimoda. Her grandmother has moved into Misako's parents' home, and thus her home is available for us to stay. Shimoda is an oceanside resort community and fishing village. It is the perfect respite we need at this point. Days at the beach and exploring this small town take up our time, with Misako's sister Sawako helping by driving us around to see the sights. Anne-Marie has always had a great love of photographing laundry hanging up. We're feeling quite at home now after 3 weeks in Japan. The Japanese seem to love dressing up Westerners in yukata and kimono, and Anne-Marie obliges. I hope we can come back. June 29th, 1982, day 25. We head to Kyoto on the Shinkansen, or in English, the bullet train. It's one of the most famous trains in the world, reaching speeds of 140 miles per hour. Osaka is just a short train ride from Kyoto, and we visit Osaka first. As Japan's second largest city, it feels quite different from Tokyo. We see it as being more Midwestern, more like Chicago. Japan's re-entry into the world after World War II is signified by two events, the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo and the 1970 World's Fair in Osaka. The site of the 1970 World's Fair is now a park. Although fairs are designed to be transitory events, some of the display remains. For over 1,000 years, Kyoto was the capital of Japan. Today, it remains the capital of traditional Japanese culture. It's also one of the few cities that retains the look and feel of old Japan. Kyoto is a very comfortable, livable city. In spite of being more touristy than Tokyo, it does have a sense of quiet spirituality. The Japanese maintain a strong interest in folk practice, but they can also spend hours in pachinko parlors hoping to win a few yen for their skill at these combination pinball and slot machines. A visit to the Russian embassy in Tokyo turns up our visas. It's been weighing heavy on us, so to know we are on our way to the USSR is good news. We're now off to Yokohama to take the boat to Nakhodka, and from there we cross Siberia on the Trans-Siberian Rail. Although certainly not a cruise ship in the manner of the Love Boat, this Art Deco white steamship, the MS Baikal, offers a very interesting travel experience between Japan and the Asian continent. Seeing the hammer and sickle insignia of the Soviet Union can't help but bring out strange feelings. But to actually board a vessel flying the USSR flag is a truly bizarre experience. The boat is a little smaller and older than we thought it would be, but it is also a whole lot nicer. It's really a vintage Art Deco steamer in pristine condition. After heading north along Japan's east coast, the ship turns due west and goes through the straits between Honshu, Japan's main island, and Hokkaido, its northern island. From here, it's a straight shot across the Japan Sea to the eastern edge of Siberia. At night, the ship and the sea become very peaceful and romantic. The fresh salt air, the cool breeze, the sound of the boat and the water, and the rich star-filled sky of a clear night assault our senses. Each day feels like a novel. Anne-Marie calls it a Hemingway experience. We are truly lucky, yet we also feel courageous, and perhaps a little crazy too. Squid boats are often mistaken for UFOs. Seeing the eerie sight of strings of hanging lights, one understands how the crew and passengers of both airplanes and ships can be fooled. Squid boats do not look like anything familiar. July 8th, day 34, entering the port of Nakhodka. Nakhodka emerges from the fog in its very interesting city surrounded by lush green hills and dominated by lumber mills and shipyards. The city is modern and has no hint of Americans' preconceived notions of Siberia. Before taking the Trans-Siberian, tourists take the overnight train from Nakhodka to Khabarovsk. The modern station, like much of eastern Russia, is relatively new. We are told we have an hour and a half to kill and feel free to wander around town. The stores are well equipped with goods, and the infamous Soviet queuing lines are non-existent in Khabarovsk. We have no restrictions, no guides, and no one following us. We freely wander the streets, looking at shops and taking photographs. We are told our train has arrived and we should go through a tunnel to get to our train. It's dark and dusty. Everywhere we look and step are Russian soldiers returning from the Chinese border. Most are lying across their duffel bags on the floor with their rifles laying on their laps. Some are more than just exhausted, they are wounded. We do not dare lift our cameras to our eyes to take a picture, but in our minds we record an image that will no doubt remain with us the rest of our lives. Trans-Siberian train is not as clean and comfortable as the train from Khabarovsk was. Most of the passengers only travel for a day or two on this train, as air travel is much faster. The train contains a few second-class sleepers, mostly dominated by Eastern European tourists, and there's only one first-class car on the train, and we are in it. We are now traveling with and like the Russian locals. The food selection is limited and the quality is poor even for train food. We and Bruno, a French embassy employee, are the only non-Soviets in the first-class car. 2 British women and Japanese student are traveling second class with a group of Eastern German students. The Soviets in our car seem to be put off by our designer jeans, our suitcases weighted down with goods. We must epitomize the decadent capitalists. Siberia passes out of our window of the train. It's amazingly remote. The few towns we do see are very rural. The whole area is not unlike what one imagines 19th century Canada to have been like. The train does stop at regular intervals. This can be anywhere from 2 to 30 minutes, but there's a real fear of being left behind, as no announcements are made as to the length of the stop or when the train is leaving. In spite of this, many passengers, including us, do get off. Most stations have stands selling local food. which may include fresh fruit and vegetables, pine nuts, or in poorer areas, boiled potatoes. Not only food, but we also stopped to buy 1980 Olympic souvenirs, particularly buttons. We are over a third of the way into our 100-day trip, but we are doing extremely well. With the pace slowed down and the mood romantic, we decide that if we can get through a trip like this, we can do anything. We've decided to get married next spring. Lacking anything permanent for the occasion, David paints a gold band on Anne-Marie's finger with a permanent marker. For hours on end, the peaceful view continues to pass by out the window. The diversity of the scenery is remarkable. From tropical dense forests on the coast to the timberland and plains of the true Siberia, the vast Lake Baikal, and the mountains and farmland we enter into Europe. In spite of our original fear of boredom on a 7-day trip, we are now wishing the trip was longer. The pace is very enjoyable. We are in dire need of hot showers, decent food, and for me, a nice cold bottle of Coca-Cola. But we are in heaven. Our time in the train is taken up with reading, photographing out the window, and talking to the locals, and just sitting watching the world go by. Although most of the locals eat food they brought with them, or from the vendors and stands on the station, there is a restaurant car on the train. The cook and head waiter are friendly and helpful, but their menu is limited to chicken, hamburger, eggs, and soup, all of which are somewhat questionable quality. Anne-Marie has made friends with little Luba, a young girl from Siberia, and she has combed and tied back her hair with American barrettes. Gradually, the rest of the car seems to accept us, not as nasty Americans they no doubt have been told about, but as people just like them. At Irkutsk, all the non-Russians get off to spend the night at Lake Baikal. We are now the only foreigners on the train. We spend most of the evenings with English-Russian dictionaries on our laps, trying to communicate with the locals. When we tell them we're from Minnesota, they get excited. Minnesota is on TV here, one of them says. I wonder, can Mary Tyler Moore be on in the USSR? It's a famous place, she continues. We hear about the bad weather there. It's very cold and lots of snow. Great. So the people in Siberia think our weather is worse than theirs. There seems to be no difference between Asia and Europe. The marker isn't much. You generally notice more driving across the state line in the U.S. It's only at night when the train struggles up the Ural Mountains that you get a sense you're entering something new and different. The train stations and towns are starting to get bigger and even more like the American Midwest. 9 days after leaving Japan, we reach Moscow. As we pass through Moscow Station, the enormity of the culture shock of being in the USSR sinks in. July 15th, day 41, Moscow. We arrive in Moscow for our stay at the Inn Tourist Hotel. It's very popular, but also very bland. But the location next to Red Square is ideal. Best of all, it has a hot shower. St. Basil's Cathedral on Red Square is one of a handful of structures that, as a single icon, can represent a whole country. Across from St. Basil's Cathedral sits Gum Department Store. Russians dress up, but on the whole are not style-conscious people. Privilege means more and better options. The elite of Moscow wear European couture and American jeans. In a country that suffered so much during World War II, as citizens and tourists are constantly reminded of this fact, Russia's military and its veterans are very visible and very well respected. Another Red Square icon, of course, is Lenin's tomb. Lines into the tomb are usually blocks long. Wedding parties in Moscow make a visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier. Brides leave bouquets of flowers. Behind is a memorial. The Economic Achievement Exhibition Center is a 500-acre park on the outskirts of Moscow. Part State Fair, part Smithsonian, and part Disneyland, it's a popular destination for Russians. Architecturally, it's related to the 1930s and the 50s in style. Exhibits include agriculture, industry, history, and two of the more popular ones, the Air and Space Museum and the petting zoo of farm animals. Anne-Marie is not feeling well. It hit her on the train just before we arrived. She did have some travel sickness pills along. She took some at the first sign of feeling sick and seems to be sleeping it off. It does mean I'm on my own for dinner. Knowing from the train, however, that menus are worthless, I asked what I should order, and the waiter replies, filet. When he brings me a large carafe of the red wine I really hope not to get, I consider this an omen of yet another bad dinner. 3 women laden with shopping bags are seated at my table. Although I do not speak Russian, the manager is very clear: either sit with the American or leave. They each receive a large carafe of red wine, and soon we've all had enough wine to drink that we really don't care. When my steak comes, I'm sober enough to know this is the best steak I've ever had. It's fantastic. I occasionally nod with approval to them as I dig into this wonderful meal. When their food comes, 2 receive steaks and a third gets fish. Obviously, she had ordered steak as well and was very upset. She then decides that my half-eaten steak is probably hers. She starts pointing at my food and demands that the waiter bring her a steak. Again, the manager intervenes, and again, after much yelling, he points her towards the door. She agrees to eat her fish, but regularly gives me dirty looks. I feel very lucky I've escaped being sick. I return to the room and tell Anne-Marie of my adventures in the restaurant, and I go out to take some photographs. I return feeling exhausted a couple hours later and fall asleep. About 3 a.m., I wake up in the morning, feeling sicker than I ever thought humanly possible. The hotel is concerned enough that a physician is called in. Her care and concern for me is genuine. With her restrictive diet and carbon pills, I'll be well enough to catch the train to Leningrad. I know that crossing the Soviet Union will have a significant and lasting effect on us. July 19th, day 45. Our hotel in Leningrad, however, is worth every ruble. Pushkia is like staying in a museum. The hotel was first built in the early 1800s to serve foreigners visiting the Tsar. Leningrad is a very historic city with frequent reminders from the time it was known as St. Petersburg. Many of the palaces and buildings date to the early 18th century, when the Tsar moved the capital here. Some of the churches are being rehabbed as museums, while others are being restored to use again as churches. July 21st, day 47. We leave the USSR by train for Finland. We feel like we're in northern Minnesota. The bright colors everywhere are like neon signs in a dark, cold night as we wander Helsinki. I think we were color deprived in the USSR. For Anne-Marie, 2 days in Leningrad and 2 in Helsinki are not enough. In principle, I agree, but I do not see an alternative. We must keep moving. We must go to Brussels, Paris, and London after we leave Scandinavia. We decide to put off a decision for a while. In the evening, we board our ship for a night cruise to Stockholm. In Stockholm, we make our way to Anne-Marie's cousin Marit's apartment. She just finished college and is taking the summer off before looking for a job. Parts of Stockholm have remained unchanged for over 200 years. Gamla Stan, or Old Town, is an area of narrow, winding streets with old-world restaurants and modern jazz clubs. In Old Town, patrons from disco to punk clubs share the streets with customers of sidewalk cafes and high-priced antique stores. Stockholm's relatively new subway stations have been designed with the aid of Swedish artists. The Blue Cave theme of this station is one of the more unique and interesting stops. A Swedish smorgasbord in America is often a plate of herring, some Swedish meatballs, and 5 types of jello. In Sweden, however, a smorgasbord is a real treat. Every Scandinavian city has a Tivoli or amusement park. Gunnar Lund is Stockholm's. It shares an island with Wisconsin, an outdoor museum. There's folk music and a dance pavilion. Young and old seem to share a love for Swedish traditions. From Stockholm, we move to Älvdalen. I've been looking forward to seeing the real Sweden in Älvdalen, the way we saw the real Japan in Shimoda. For Anne-Marie, it's a chance to reconnect with her mother's cousins, including a distant cousin, Anna. I also bring a Japanese kimono for Maya, Morit's mother, to show her grade school students. After close to 2 months on the road, spending a few weeks with her relatives here near Göteborg will be a great welcome relief. We made a call home and learned that our house had been broken into, and my car has been in an accident and is in the impound lot. What's worse is our renters seem to be the primary suspect. I'm using the term renters loosely because they've not paid 1 cent during the past months. To say we picked the wrong people to watch our house is an understatement. We can't call the renters because the phone has been disconnected for non-payment. My family feels we should end the trip and return home to deal with our problems. Anne-Marie's parents are less convinced we should end the trip. The renter's boyfriend, who seems to be the main problem, has skipped town. I'm depressed as hell, and Lessa, in his quiet way, tries to help by taking us on day trips. We know the insurance will cover the car and our stolen valuables, but thinking of these problems brings us back home, back to the real world we had successfully avoided the past 8 weeks. Lessa takes us to wilderness areas near the Norwegian border to show us timber cutting areas that he's been actively fighting against. We also visit the factory that makes the famous Dalarna or Dala horses, a tourist item found not just in Sweden, but any respectable Scandinavian gift shop in Minnesota as well. Maya and Lessa have been wonderful, but we hear the road calling us to move on. We are feeling renewed vigor. We've decided that no one is going to stop us from continuing and completing this trip. We now both agree it's time to push on and return to our original plans. We do decide to accompany Marit and some of her friends to Smorgon, a typical small coastal village that lies north of Göteborg. It's also a popular tourist destination and sailing harbor. August 17th, day 74. After a quick stop in Oslo, we take the train to Gol, and from there we transfer to a bus that takes us through the winding mountain roads and switchbacks to Husom. The mountain scenery is incredible. At last I understand what people see in mountains. We're going to the Husom Hotel, as my great-great-grandfather Einar left Husom, Norway with his young family in the 1870s to move to Minnesota. The hotel exceeds our wildest expectations. It's run by Britta Husom, who takes the summers off to come here with her mother and father to oversee the hotel. The Husom Hotel was first built to serve horseback messengers that were on the winding mountain road from Oslo to Lærdal. The area quickly became famous for its salmon fishing, however, and for the past 100 years, the hotel has served wealthy Europeans, including British royalty, that come here to fish the Lærdal River. During World War II, property was taken over by German military. Ironically, Germans make up the bulk of the tourists today. With the steep slopes in the valley and narrow terraced parcels of land on the hillside, farming using modern machinery is not practical. Therefore, the farm is now run by the Husom brothers, both in their late 60s, as a hobby farm. Horses are used for plowing, and all the hay is hand-cut. He points to a small clearing on top of a mountain and says, "That's Einar's potato patch." Einar was your great-great-grandfather. He would climb up there every spring and plant potatoes. He'd go back in the fall and carry down his harvest. You can still see the foundations of one of the 3 houses on the property where members of my family had lived. The old Van Hille road from Morgan to Lærdal did not meet the needs of modern transportation, but it is still there as a shorter and far more picturesque than walking the current highway that passes on the other side of the mountain. It's ironic that the descendants of those that stayed in this rugged area of Norway now live off the beauty of the terrain that was once such a burden. We're hiking to the Borgen Stave Church, built around 1180. I actually studied this church in class on Scandinavian art and design in grad school. And here we are. It's the church my family went to. Although Oslo has a population of less than 500,000, it's another world-class city. Most of the stores and businesses close at 3 o'clock in the summertime, so everyone can go out and enjoy the parks. A favorite both of locals and tourists is a sculpture and museum displaying the work of Gustav Vigeland. The center of the park is a phallic obelisk of intertwined naked bodies, surrounded by larger-than-life sculptures of embracing couples. It is one of the most important sculpture groups in modern art. Although it'd be a controversial addition to almost any city in America, it is loved and appreciated by Vigeland's countrymen and women. August 24th, day 81. We take the train from Oslo to Copenhagen. We now find ourselves in Copenhagen at 6 a.m., dead tired, and the city's hotels are booked solid. Finally, we're told that there's an opening at a hotel within walking distance of the station, and it's very convenient. However, be aware it's in the heart of the pornography district. Copenhagen's most famous attraction is Tivoli Gardens, an amusement park. Tivoli is a place to sit and watch the world go by. The people watching alone is worth the minimal price of admission. Amsterdam is a city of canals. Over 50 canals cut through the city in concentric circles radiating from the center of town. The canals were built in the 17th and 18th century, when Amsterdam was one of the world's most important centers of commerce. The homes and trade shops built by the Dutch merchants have remained unchanged since that time. August 31, day 89. Brussels is another ancient city, but what brought it to the attention of the modern world was the 1958 World's Fair. The 335-foot atomium is the symbol of the 1958 fair. It has been preserved, if you define that as nothing's been done to it, for nearly 25 years. Nothing. If the atomium is Brussels' symbol of the modern age, the symbol of its medieval past is mannequin piss. Seeing the actual sculpture is a bit disappointing because full-size reproductions of it are available everywhere. On the other hand, walking into a tourist shop and seeing rows and rows and rows of mannequin piss in every size imaginable is a bit of a treat. Belgians flock to restaurants and outdoor stalls during the fall mussel season. They are served steamed in a broth or with other seafood in a soup, fresh off the fishing boats. They're a meal in themselves. September 4th, day 93. It's fashion season in Paris, and the hotel rooms are hard to come by. We end up spending more on a room than we would have liked, but having less than wonderful accommodations in the last few cities, a bit of luxury is appreciated. On the evening of our first full day in Paris, I announced we're going to take a surprise magical mystery tour. Without telling Anne-Marie where we were going, we hop on the subway. Reaching our destination, we get off the metro, walk up the stairs, and there is Eiffel Tower. This is what brought me to Europe. This is the image that has haunted me for the past 2 years. This is why 18 months ago I asked Anne-Marie out on a date. I wanted some guidance on traveling to Europe. I had no idea she would be my guide through Japan and Scandinavia, but it is appropriate now. I'm sharing the Eiffel Tower with her. Our friend Mary is in Paris for the summer working on her dissertation. Mary's mother is visiting her as well, so we meet the two of them for supper. After our recent restaurant experiences, we need Mary's help. We're appreciative of her fluent French and her expertise in French cuisine. Food is the best souvenir of Paris, she tells us. We are overflowing with adventure stories to share of our journey. Likewise, she has her own 3 months of pent-up escapades to talk about. We sit on the Champs-Élysées until the early hours of the morning, describing our summer in detail. Anne-Marie and Mary each order a Calvados, a French brandy. When the bill comes, we are shocked at the 60 French francs price, about $10 each in 1982. Mary, being an art historian, gives us good suggestions for going to Versailles. At its peak during Louis XIV, the palace had over 5,000 servants and supported 1,000 nobles and their 4,000 servants as well. On October 5, 1789, a mob descended on Versailles and demanded that Louis XVI and the royal family relocate to Paris. September 11th, day 99, we take the ferry from France to England. It's a long, boring process of queuing up for every little thing. At last we see the cliffs of Dover, but once again we need to queue to leave the boat, and yet again to go through customs. A British acquaintance puts us in touch with a wonderful B&B in a residential area in London. September 16th, day 104, New York City. I've seen this city as my second home for the past 10 years, but it now seems to have lost its sparkle. But while Anne-Marie visits shops near a friend's artist loft we're staying at in Soho, I do take a day to visit the 1964 World's Fair site. Although most of the buildings are long gone, the few that remain are interesting. They represent a mid-60s view of a modern future that will forever look dated. Back home in America, the realities of life have hit us. We must now go home and deal with our renter, insurance company, and the police. And Anne-Marie hopes of finding a new career after burning out as a mental health care worker. I can only hope the plane just passes over Minneapolis, makes a sharp left turn, and brings us to Los Angeles so we can begin again. I look across the aisle and see someone studying Japanese. I believe this is a sign. I must learn Japanese, and we must return to Japan. We feel the joy of success and the sadness of completion. I now know that it's all right to be labeled a dreamer. I also know we must not lose those dreams. I look down on Minneapolis and feel an intense fear. It is a fear of the familiar. The wheels hit the runway with a long, loud thump. We are home.